Thorvald returned from his trading voyage to find Ironhold reduced to ash and bone. His wife, his children, his people, all dead. The rival clan thought they had erased him from history while he was safely away at sea. What they didn't know was that Thorvald had buried something in those ashes that would make their victory the most expensive mistake in Norse history. Thorvald the Iron Trader stood apart from other Viking jarls. While his neighbors built their power through raid and conquest, he constructed his empire through something far more sustainable: strategic trade relationships that stretched from the amber coasts of the Baltic to the silk roads of Constantinople. Ironhold wasn't just a village. It was the crown jewel of northern commerce. Built on a natural harbor that provided protection from both storms and enemies, it housed workshops where master craftsmen forged weapons coveted by kings, warehouses that stored goods from across the known world, and most importantly, a population that understood the difference between temporary plunder and permanent prosperity. Thorvald's wife, Ingrid, managed the complex web of alliances that kept their trade routes secure. His son Bjorn, barely 15 winters old, already showed the mathematical brilliance needed to calculate profits across multiple currencies and seasonal variations. His daughter Sigrid possessed the linguistic gifts essential for negotiating with foreign merchants who spoke everything from Arabic to Greek. Together, they had built something unprecedented in the violent world of the 9th century. A settlement that proved intelligence could triumph over aggression, that planning could defeat impulse, and that cooperation generated more wealth than conquest ever could. But not everyone appreciated the lesson. Some men looked at Ironhold's prosperity and saw not inspiration, but insult. Across the narrow strait that separated their territories, Jarl Ragnar Ironbreaker watched Ironhold's success with growing resentment. Where Thorvald's ships returned heavy with exotic goods, Ragnar's raiders brought back diminishing plunder from increasingly defended targets. Where Thorvald's people lived in comfortable stone houses, Ragnar's followers crowded into traditional wooden halls that leaked rain and retained cold. Most galling of all, Thorvald achieved his success without the constant warfare that defined traditional Viking leadership. He never raided Ragnar's territory, never challenged his authority, never even acknowledged him as a rival. To Ragnar, this peaceful indifference felt like the deepest possible insult. "It's not natural," Ragnar growled during his war councils, all making his voice thick with frustration. "A real jarl leads through strength, not by counting coins like some Eastern merchant. His soft approach makes all of us look weak." His berserker champion, Ulf the Mad, leaned forward with bloodshot eyes. "Then perhaps we should remind him what real Viking strength accomplishes, my lord." The plan they hatched was simple, brutal, and designed to send a message that would echo through every trading settlement in the north. Clever merchants were no match for determined warriors when the fighting actually started. They would strike when Thorvald was away on one of his extended trading voyages, eliminating not just the man, but everything he'd built. Ironhold would burn, its people would die, and the ashes would serve as a permanent reminder that in the Viking world, strength still mattered more than strategy. Thorvald's final trading expedition took him further east than ever before, following rumors of new silk routes that could revolutionize northern commerce. His ship, loaded with amber furs and silver, sailed toward markets in distant Novgorod, where Byzantine merchants promised deals that could secure Ironhold's prosperity for generations. The journey was meant to last 6 weeks, time enough to negotiate complex agreements, establish new partnerships, and return with enough wealth to expand their operations significantly. Thorvald had no way of knowing that his absence would save his life while dooming everything else he cared about. For 18 days, he haggled with foreign merchants over the precise terms of trade agreements that would benefit Ironhold for decades. For 12 more days, he traveled deeper into Russian territory, following leads about premium goods that no northern trader had ever accessed. Every day away from home was calculated to increase their future security and prosperity. But while Thorvald negotiated in distant markets, Ragnar's warband was crossing the strait under cover of darkness, carrying torches and hatred in equal measure. The attack came during the Feast of Harvest, when Ironhold's people were celebrating another successful trading season. The warehouses were full, the workshops were producing at capacity, and the community felt secure in the knowledge that their prosperity had earned them respect and protection from neighboring settlements. Ragnar's warriors struck like a plague of locusts. They began with the docks, setting fire to every ship in harbor to prevent escape or the possibility of calling for help. The flames spread quickly to the warehouses, consuming years of accumulated wealth in minutes. But Ragnar hadn't come just for plunder. This was extermination. His men went house to house with systematic thoroughness. Ingrid died defending the children with a kitchen knife, her body found later clutching a bloodied blade that had taken 2 attackers with her. Young Bjorn fell while trying to save the account books that represented his father's life work. Sigrid perished in the flames of the Great Hall, overcome by smoke while helping elderly villagers escape. The master craftsmen, the skilled traders, the wise elders who had made Ironhold prosperous, all dead. The workshops that had produced goods coveted by kings reduced to ash, the careful alliances that had protected their trade routes severed forever. By dawn, nothing remained of Ironhold except smoking ruins and scattered corpses. Ragnar's men departed with whatever portable wealth they could carry, leaving behind a message written in blood and ash. This is what happens to merchants who forget their place in a warrior's world. Thorvald's ship appeared on the horizon 3 days later, sails full with eastern wind, and cargo holds heavy with goods that would never be sold. From a distance, the harbor looked strangely quiet. No smoke from workshops, no bustle of loading and unloading, no children playing on the docks. As his ship drew closer, the silence became ominous. Then he saw the charred timbers floating in the harbor. Then the collapsed remains of buildings he'd watched grow from foundation stones. Then the crows. The first body he found was his son's, clutched around ledger books that were now indistinguishable from charcoal. The second was his wife's, her face peaceful despite the violence of her end. The third, fourth, and 100th were people whose names he'd known since childhood, whose families had trusted him to keep them safe while he pursued distant profits. But Thorvald didn't weep. Not yet. Grief was a luxury that had to wait until after more practical matters were addressed. Instead, he walked methodically through the ruins, cataloging destruction, counting bodies, and most importantly, checking carefully concealed locations that only he knew about. The secret cache remained undisturbed. Years before his final voyage, Thorvald had made preparations that even his closest family didn't know about. His travels to distant lands had taught him that prosperity attracted predators, and predators required more than diplomatic solutions. Beneath Ironhold's main warehouse, accessible only through a hidden entrance disguised as a collapsed support beam, lay an arsenal that could arm a small kingdom. Not just Viking weapons, but exotic arms acquired through years of international trade. Byzantine Greek fire, Arab steel that could cut through Norse iron like cloth, English longbows with range that shamed traditional spears, Eastern crossbows with mechanical precision unknown in Scandinavian warfare. But weapons were only part of the treasure. The cache also contained detailed maps of every fortification along the northern coasts, comprehensive intelligence about rival settlements' defenses, and most valuable of all, complete records of which merchants and warriors could be purchased with the right combination of gold and pressure. Thorvald had spent 15 years preparing for a war he'd hoped never to fight. Now, Standing in the ashes of his murdered family, he realized that hope had been naive. Revenge requires more than weapons. It demands warriors willing to use them without mercy or hesitation. Thorvald's trading connections provided access to men that traditional Viking recruitment could never reach. He sailed first to the Rus territories, where displaced warriors sold their services to the highest bidder. Men who had lost their own clans to political intrigue, who understood the difference between honorable death in battle and meaningless slaughter of innocents. Men who would follow orders that regular Viking warriors might question on moral grounds. Next, he traveled to the mercenary camps of Eastern Europe, where he recruited specialists in siege warfare, infiltration, and systematic destruction. These weren't noble warriors seeking glory. They were professionals who treated killing like craftsmanship and demanded payment in gold rather than honor. Most cunningly, he sought out survivors of other massacres, men and women who had lost everything to raiders like Ragnar and nursed their own hunger for payback. These allies required no payment except the opportunity to practice their skills on enemies who represented everything they had learned to hate. Within 2 years, Thorvald commanded a force unlike anything seen in the northern world. Not a traditional warband bound by clan loyalty and personal honor, but a multicultural army united by shared purpose and professional competence. Thorvald's revenge wasn't the hot-blooded assault that Ragnar might have expected. Instead, it was a masterpiece of patient strategic warfare that unfolded over seasons like a carefully tended garden of destruction. First, Ragnar's trading partners began experiencing mysterious accidents. Ships sank in calm weather, warehouses burned despite careful guarding, trusted allies were found dead under circumstances that suggested either remarkable bad luck or impossible enemy infiltration. Second, Ragnar's own people started disappearing, not in dramatic raids that might inspire defensive unity, but in small groups during routine activities, a hunting party that never returned, a patrol that vanished between villages, workers who went missing from fields and workshops. Each disappearance was calculated to create fear without providing a clear target for retaliation. Ragnar's warriors began looking over their shoulders, sleeping with weapons, and questioning whether their leader had somehow angered supernatural forces. Most effectively, Thorvald began spreading rumors that Ragnar had murdered Ironhold's people not for territory or honor, but because they had discovered something shameful about his leadership. The specific details varied with each telling, but the underlying message remained constant. Ragnar Ironbreaker was hiding secrets worth killing for. By the 3rd year, Ragnar's settlement was trapped in a spiral of paranoia and declining morale. His warriors couldn't fight an enemy they couldn't locate, defend against attacks they couldn't predict, or trust allies who might be working for invisible opponents. Ragnar himself was aging rapidly under the stress of constant vigilance. His hair had gone white, his hands shook when he thought no one was watching, and his famous berserker rage was being replaced by nervous exhaustion. The breaking point came when Ragnar's own son began questioning his father's version of events at Ironhold. Too many details didn't align with the heroic victory story that Ragnar had been telling. Too many witnesses remembered things differently. Too many consequences seemed disproportionate to the supposed threat that Ironhold had represented. "Father," Harold said during a private moment, his young voice carrying dangerous doubt, "what really happened that night? What were you so afraid of that you had to kill everyone?" Ragnar realized that his enemy had accomplished something more devastating than any military defeat. He'd turned Ragnar's own family against him through the simple expedient of making them think. The end came during the feast of winter solstice, when Ragnar's depleted forces were gathered in their great hall, trying to recapture some of the confidence and unity that had once defined their clan. But as they raised their horns of mead to toast their survival of another year, the doors burst open. Thorvald entered alone, but behind him stood an army that represented the nightmares of every warrior who had ever committed unforgivable acts. Mercenaries from a dozen nations, survivors of countless massacres, and refugees from every form of violence that the Viking Age had invented. But the most terrifying sight wasn't the foreign soldiers or exotic weapons. It was Thorvald himself, transformed by grief and purpose into something that transcended simple human emotion. His face carried the calm of absolute certainty, his movements the precision of someone who had planned every detail of this moment for years. "You burned my village," Thorvald said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the frozen hall. "You murdered my family. You thought that ending their lives would end my story." He stepped closer to Ragnar, who sat paralyzed on his high seat like a rabbit facing a wolf. "But you made one crucial mistake," Thorvald continued, drawing a blade that gleamed with foreign steel. "You assumed that a merchant's power died with his people. What you didn't understand is that true power isn't built from loyalty or fear. It's built from preparation." Ragnar's death was neither quick nor honorable. Thorvald had learned techniques from Eastern executioners that could extend dying for hours while maintaining perfect consciousness. The man who had burned families alive experienced every sensation his victims had felt, multiplied by the systematic expertise of professional torturers. But even that wasn't the real revenge. The real payback came when Thorvald claimed Ragnar's territory, absorbed his surviving people into a new settlement, and rebuilt Ironhold as a monument to the principle that intelligence combined with preparation could overcome any amount of brute force. Standing in his new hall, surrounded by warriors from across the known world who had chosen to follow strategy rather than tradition, Thorvald understood that his family's deaths had taught him something valuable. Mercy was a luxury that merchants couldn't afford when dealing with those who mistook commerce for weakness. Some debts are paid in gold, others are paid in blood, ash, and the systematic destruction of everything the debtor ever loved. The new Ironhold rose from the ashes stronger, richer, and infinitely more dangerous than the original. And every trader who passed through its rebuilt docks learned the same lesson. There are some mistakes so expensive that they bankrupt entire bloodlines. If this tale of ultimate payback moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which part shocked you the most. Subscribe to Time for Payback for more legendary stories where betrayal meets justice. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, because every betrayal has its reckoning, and every story holds the power to change everything. What revenge story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions below. Until next time, remember, karma never forgets.